Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deercast Discussions with me, Harry, and Tom. Today we are having a bit of a chat about the DSC1. Sort of what is it, where can you do it, what does it cost, what's involved, any sort of tips and tricks that we have. Both me and Tom have done it. I did it 2 years ago, and you did it a little bit longer.
2018.
2018. Okay, so sort of
Four years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Exactly. Firstly, what is the DSC1 to the sort of layman? It means the Deer Stalker Certificate 1, which is the sort of first level of the two the main deer stalking qualifications in the UK. Obviously, all over the world, there are lots of sort of different other hunting training schemes. Sort of Germany, I know you need to do like sort of whole month of training, but in England, broadly, we don't have anything really for sort of pests. I don't believe.
Well, and none of this is compulsory either. So in like Germany, for example, to get a permit, basically to go out hunting, you have to have done your training. Whereas here, if you wanted to, you could go out without having done this.
Before you can go and do any hunting at all, you have to have done it, and it's really stringent. Like you have to know about ballistics, about every aspect of shooting, all the different seasons and species for everything. In the UK, we really only have the DSC as a sort of bench line qualification. So it's basically the entry level deer stalking qualification. It'll give you a really good sort of round training on deer stalking on all aspects of the sort of from the safety to the shooting to the species, etc. And it used to carry with it the game meat hygiene certificate within the DSC1 qualification itself. You used to get your hunter ID number that you put on your tags. Now I believe it's separate. You have to do game meat hygiene. Usually it's with the DSC itself. But that's something just to bear in mind, and you'll need that if you want to sell sort of venison to game dealers, especially.
You can tell if you've got one of the old style qualifications that includes your game meat hygiene, because it's a blue coloured certificate like this one, and then if you haven't, I can't remember what colour yours is.
I don't know what colour mine is. No,
what colour?
I can't remember.
We'll put it in the comments.
Yeah, put it in the description.
And I mean with it you get sent a nice big hefty training manual with lots of bits and pieces in there that you've got to learn. And I don't know about you, but format of ours was, and if you look online, it's sort of 3 to 4 days long, and you pretty much have two days of lecturing where you kind of sit there. Someone will essentially go through the course manual with you, but at the same time, I think it's a wise idea having done it already. And in the back of the training manual as well is quite a big section of suggested questions or hypothetical questions they might ask you. And then the third day for me was the assessment, which consisted of a multiple choice test on kind of deer biology and ballistics, sort of rifle safety, that kind of type of stuff. There was an ID quiz, so could you identify deer safely, and then there was the game meat hygiene element to it, and then the practical shooting test. I don't know if yours was similar.
Exactly the same. No, that hasn't changed.
And shooting test was, for me, although I think it's now changed and actually probably more relevant to tell you how it is now, is from 100 metres, a couple of shots from prone into a black and white deer-sized target, and they've got to land within the sort of kill zone within the chest. You then move forward to 70 metres, and it's either sitting, kneeling, standing, but with quad sticks or some kind of shooting rest, and again, couple of shots into the chest, and they've got to land within that kill zone. And then you move forward to, is it 10, 15 metres?
Something like that, yeah.
Standing, couple of shots, but they've got to go into the head of the deer within the kill zone.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, to be honest, you'd sort of hope was fairly achievable for most deer stalkers, but I'd say there were definitely one or two on my course anyway who struggled, which was quite surprising to see.
Yeah. Same with me. And they were 4-inch. I mean, the 100 and the 70 metre targets were 4-inch targets. So, you'd think big, you could probably try, and most people should be able to get an MOA, an inch at 100 yards off a bipod with your deer rifle. Thought that was pretty. That should be your aim at least. Maybe 1.5 or something like that. But yeah. I suppose under the pressure and things always inevitably go wrong with rifles. So
I think probably some people's nerves. Like I was quite surprised that how nervous some people got about the shooting test element, and I'm sure that probably played a part in their shooting ability.
Yeah, I think both of us probably done quite a lot of stalking and shooting before we did it, and for a lot of people it is the first thing they do before they even go out shooting once, and obviously you've got people standing behind you often watching. Yeah. So that's, there's a bit of pressure there.
Yeah, and you spent money to be there as well, which is something we'll mention in a minute, is the cost of it. But again, if you know you've paid all this money, you want this qualification, that comes into play as well, doesn't it?
Exactly. And then you should mention the 10 to 15 yards. It's I think it is a 2-inch target, and you can buy all of the DSC targets that they use on, I think it's the BDS website. They sell them like little cards, and they sell so it'll basically be a silhouette of a deer, and they'll put on these sort of A4 size targets with a black spot, so you can buy them, so you can go and test them in the field if you wanted to do some sort of real life practice.
And the cost of it, we had a quick scan around on Google earlier, didn't we? Yeah. Somewhere, well, depending on, so BDS, National Gamekeepers Organisation, and BASC are kind of the three big providers. There are some independents. I did mine through a local rifle range, but the three of them all offer courses, all offer it for both members and non-members, and there's a slight sort of discount obviously for members, but I mean broadly speaking, it was, when we were looking online, somewhere between sort of £250 and £400, depending on who you were going with, whether you were a member or not, whether you wanted to include the game meat hygiene element or not. So a kind of bit of a broad range in terms of pricing there.
And I think I would definitely recommend doing the game meat hygiene if you get the option, because it's not just getting your stalker number to sell, it's also a lot of the sort of essential stuff about keeping meat and making sure that you're actually, if you were going to say, oh well, I don't need it because I'm never going to sell it, then I'd say, well, actually, you're going to be eating it, you might be giving it to your friends and family, and it's actually gives you some really helpful kind of tips on temperatures and what to look for and notifiable diseases and all this sort of stuff. That actually you kind of think, well, if you see some spots on the lung or whatever, it'd be quite good to know about that kind of thing.
I think when I did mine, there wasn't a single person who, because you could then opt out of doing it, and there wasn't a single person who did. And I mean, it was a fairly kind of simple, easy part of the day as well, and like you say, you learned so much valuable information on it. Yeah,
exactly. And it wasn't the sort of like the test element of it. It wasn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of it was quite tricky stuff. But I feel like if you sat down and you'd listened the whole time and you'd taken notes and you paid proper attention, then it's achievable. They're not trying to trip you up. They're there to help you. And certainly when I did it with the BDS, they would go through questions with you if you were unsure about it, and it was one of those sort of very nice environments. I think the thing that people do fail is the shooting test, because it's not the sort of thing where you can go, oh, I didn't really understand this question, can I have another go at it or something? If you fail the shooting test, if you're not hitting within a 4-inch target, and they still pass, if they were to still pass you, for instance, that it sort of defeats the point of having a qualification or a baseline for sort of competence, if you like. So I think that is the only two people that failed on my course were on the shooting test.
Mine were exactly the same.
So I think if I was going to advise anyone what to practice, it would be obviously brush up on what's in the book, but also just practice your shooting under some sort of stressful conditions.
And I think the question that probably get asked the most is it worth doing? And you quite often see online as well, a lot of people say, oh well, I've been stalking for years, so I don't need to bother doing it. And my response to most people in that sort of camp is, I think it's definitely worth doing, because it sounds very obvious, but you don't know what you don't know until you go and do something like this. I mean, I'd been stalking for a few years before I went and did my DSC1, and there were things that I picked up and learnt in it that I hadn't known before, I hadn't realised before, I hadn't realised the significance of it before. And then as well as actually then having learnt that, I've then got a qualification I can present to people, but also I met friends and people and contacts on there that I wouldn't have done otherwise.
So so do I. It's a really good place to meet local, like you could probably do it near where you live. Yeah. There'll be people of a like mind. You'll have a chance to have a chat and a bit of a where do you stalk, what do you do? Like loads of people meet sort of stalking friends through it,
Yeah.
so it's good from that element. But like you say, there's so much knowledge about, and about other species as well that you might not come into regular contact with. Like for instance, like I've never stalked seen a seeker deer, but I could definitely identify one now, having gone on the DSC, and they tell you exactly what to look for. And actually that came in useful when I went to Scotland, because they said, well, don't shoot any seeker, but if you see a red, then shoot it. So I was able to differentiate between them. So it's all very useful knowledge. I think definitely advocate for it.
And I think as well, there's a responsibility within our industry to go out and do stuff like this, because none of this is mandatory, as we said. But actually, if we can show that the vast majority of people involved in deer stalking go out and do it anyway, then it adds a defence of not making it mandatory, because you say, well, most people are doing it, so we're trying to be as ethical and as best practices as we possibly can ourselves, so we don't need to have something mandatory forced upon us. Whereas if we're all sort of seen to be kicking and screaming and can't be bothered to go and do courses like this, it doesn't paint a great picture for the industry, I wouldn't say.
No.
But that's enough of my soapbox. Unless there's anything else to say about the DSC1, we'll probably wrap up that one here. If any of you've got any questions about where to do your DSC1, questions about some of the questions contained in the manual or the shooting test, or where to go and do it, then please drop us a comment below. And of course, as per usual, please like, comment and subscribe. Thank you very much.